Welcome to the Alpha Vedic podcast, and thank you for being with us here today. Dr. Barre Lando here, and today I'm speaking with Etienne and we'll be discussing his latest book, To See the Cage is to Leave It, 25 Techniques the Few Use to Control the Many. Etienne, my friend, good to see you again. How is my French pronunciation?
You did better than most. You forgot the squared.
The square, okay.
I use a numeral 2 as an exponent to denote myself that I'm not the original Etienne de la Boissy squared, and that's the only way you can find me in a search engine.
We strongly believe at Alpha Vedic that self-reliance is something that's essential that we all need to get back to. And really that when we moved away from self-reliance, that what ended up generating, let's say, a more dependence on government. So maybe we'll start off with the first question. What could possibly go wrong with that?
Well, so for folks in your audience that aren't familiar with my work, my original book was called Government, the Biggest Scam in History. And my main thesis is that government is always illegitimate. It's immoral. It's impossible to have a legitimate government. And so it's really been the biggest scam in history. And one of the ways that government, has perpetrated itself on the population is by creating dependency in government on a huge segment of the population is completely dependent on it for their jobs, whether they're public school teachers or in the military. They've forced people into their retirement system, so now a lot of people are completely dependent upon it for their retirement. They've forced people they've monopolized the medicine. They've created artificial poverty. They've impoverished the population, and then they've gotten a huge segment of the population dependent upon cash welfare and on these on SNAP benefits and everything else. And so that's one of the ways that they've been able to maintain their control, is they've gotten so many people completely dependent upon the government.
An interesting statistic, the numbers are going to be in the ballpark here, but in the early 1900s, the majority, I think it was maybe in the 80, 90 percentile, were all self-employed, early 1900s. And at present time, the majority of people are employees, and amidst those employees, over 50%, might even be more now because these are old statistics, derive their income directly or indirectly from the government.
I used to live outside of Washington, D.C., and it is the land of the Beltway Bandit, and it's somewhat creepy how much of the population of Washington, D.C. is completely dependent on the government. And it's the other thing that's creepy. A lot of people don't realize this, but 4 out of the top 10 wealthiest suburbs, in the counties in the United States are all right outside of Washington, D.C. And so that's Loudoun County, Virginia, it's Fairfax County, Virginia, Arlington County, Virginia, and Prince William County, Maryland. And they lead the nation in fine wine consumption and in luxury goods, and it's amazing. And when I lived there, whenever the topic would get brought up at a dinner party or at a get together or something like that, I would always make the running joke that it's almost like the wealth of an entire country was stolen and concentrated into this one area around Washington, D.C. And the funny thing is that Washington D.C. doesn't really make anything. There's no real industry except for the Beltway bandits and there is the internet industry. I was in the internet businesses, which is how I came to live outside of Washington D.C. But besides the internet, which was a DARPA program and funded, it was essentially a military network that the Pentagon lets us use so that they can spy and track and trace us, while we're using it. Besides that, DC doesn't make anything, but yet that's where all of the wealth of the country has been accumulated into.
Well, on a positive note, there has been some exposure, even though most of it's wrapped up in a lot of media theater as a distraction. But there has been some exposure to a lot of folks that are getting their eyes open, realizing where that money actually comes from. We can get, it's a, vast topic, but we could get into the Federal Reserve and how they harvest us and make things out of thin air and so forth. But yeah, there's a reason why that wealth is there. It's not real wealth, but it is there available for them to maintain what, really appears to me as a little cult, what you're describing.
Well, now you're going to give away the ending of my new book.
Uh-oh.
But so I have a new book out, and the original book was "Government: The Biggest Scam in History," and the subtitle of that book was "How Intergenerational Organized Crime Runs the Government, the Media, and Academia."
Yeah.
And my thesis in the book is really that government has been the biggest scam in history. It's
Yeah.
impossible to have a legitimate government or moral government. And so it's best thought of as a technique for robbing and controlling populations. I don't want to give away the ending, but it's the banks on the top, and the banks create money out of thin air using a technique called fractional reserve banking. And for your audience that isn't familiar with it, when you go to a bank to get a mortgage or a loan or a 50-year mortgage, they're not going to lend you deposit or money. They just create those digital dollars out of thin air, even
Well,
though that's inflationary, and even though that steals the value out of everybody else's money to let the banks create, gazillions and gazillions of digital dollars. It kind of dilutes the value of the dollars that are in circulation. So the whole basis of our monetary system is essentially theft and fraud and a scam. And to protect that unethic, that corrupt system, they bought up the media and academia, and they control the information that society receives, so that they can tax farm the population by stealing the value out of the money, and with confiscatory taxes, and handing money out the back door of Washington D.C., whether it's for mandatory vaccines, whether it's for weapon systems that we don't need to fight wars based on lies, manufactured intelligence, whether that's on for ethanol subsidies, or a gazillion other ways that the federal government is sliding money out the back door to identifiable interests that then get recirculated into campaign contributions, so that the same so that essentially the 99% of the Congress are like what Mark Twain said was the only criminal class, distinctly criminal class in the country, is the Congress. And it is one of the things that we're doing and exposing at the Art of Liberty Foundation is that government is being run as a criminal enterprise out of Washington D.C. And what my new book breaks down is one of the ways they get around it is they've been indoctrinating the belief in having a government as a religion. Now, they don't call it a religion, but they're using all the tricks and the techniques of an unethically manipulative religion or a cult to indoctrinate and to propagandize and to trick the population into going along with something that is against their interest.
yeah, and one more comment about the money system, which I believe makes it even more sinister. It's not just that they're printing money out of thin air. We've all heard the the saying that it's based on the full faith and credit of the American people. So a corporation such as the Federal Reserve or United States Incorporated, it's a piece of paper. It has no sentience. It has no energy. It can't do anything unless somebody can sign on to it and say, hey, I'll provide real life energy for you. We breathe our life into it whenever we sign on with all the contracts that bring us into their domain. So when we sign that 50-year mortgage, I can't even imagine that. What we're really doing with our signature is providing the credit ourselves. So it's our energy, it's our life force that is given to us by our Creator to create beauty, on this planet. And they use it. It's a real matrix-like situation where we are the batteries to keep this artificial entity going. And then based on our signature for whatever, how much the loan is, then they give us some, credit so we can go out and spend those within their system. But then, as you already described, in the fractional reserve system, now let's just say they gave you $500,000, they can loan 10 times that amount to other people, and it just keeps going exponentially into fantastical figures. And then on top of it, they say, well, if these people are so stupid that they're going to do this for us, let's go ahead and charge them interest as well. So even though it's their debt that they created, they do some shenanigans and route it through the security exchange and create a debt instrument that goes back on the left side of the banking ledger, which is now their responsibility. But then when we sign all these stacks of loan papers, we're actually agreeing to take on their debt as well with interest, and then we pay it back many times if we're lucky. But then here's the real sinister part too. They only print enough money to cover the debt based on our loans that we take out. They don't print enough to cover the interest. So if anybody's wondering why we have all these homeless folks and even people that really gave it a good stab, in their adult life to make a living, and now they don't have a home. It's because not everybody can pay back the full debt with interest because they didn't print enough to cover all that, and it's on purpose to kick us out of our home and out of the country that our forefathers paid for with their own blood.
It's a form of economic warfare against the population, and they don't want the population to have independent wealth. They don't want people to be independent. They want them dependent upon either the government or the corporations that have been monopolized by the fractional reserve system. And so just one more analogy that I like to use about fractional reserve banking. Imagine if I have a dollar, and you, dear, viewer or listener, have $1, and those $2 are the only dollars in the world. So I have 50% of the world's wealth, and you have 50% of the world's wealth. And a bank or a government comes along and creates two more dollars out of thin air using fractional reserve banking or quantitative easing or a printing press or digital dollar creation. Well, now they've stolen 50% of the world's wealth, and you and I have been reduced to 25% of the world's wealth. Now imagine multiplying that by a gazillion, transactions and a gazillion dollars, and that creates it's the most profitable criminal enterprise on the planet, which is the reason why the bank is generally the largest building in every city on the planet is a bank building. And so those obscene profits, the first thing they did is they bought up the media, so the media wouldn't tell you what's going on. And in my book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, I kind of break down, a quote from a U.S. congressman that had it entered into the congressional record of how they bought up the top 25 newspapers. And I think it was 1913, and they established an editor for each of those papers, and then they began coordinating the output of 25 newspapers in the United States to be able to widely control the information that the population received during the time of the newspaper. It goes even further back. I also tell the story of it in the founding of the country. They collapsed a newspaper in Pennsylvania that was reporting on the shady history of the Constitution and how that was forced on the population as well, and the illegitimacy of that. But like that ability to control perception, to control the information that the population receives, really is the most kind of powerful weapon. But after they bought up the media and consolidated the media, so the media wouldn't tell the population what's really going on and how they're being robbed by this system, they began to provide unlimited capital to a handful of companies to buy up and consolidate their industries. And that's really what we've got right now, is that they've been providing these cartel companies unlimited dollars, and those cartel companies have been buying up family businesses and mom and pop businesses and every kind of business to create a system where they can exercise control through BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and these large private equity companies that are holding, and the ownership of the companies bought up with fractional reserve dollars, and providing management to them, and controlling the who's sitting in the C-suite and who's sitting in the CEO position. And once you're in that hierarchical control system, then they can push down policies like everybody gets vaccinated.
Yeah.
And that's what they want. They want to be able to push down a policy like everybody's going to take this vaccine that works at this company, and you can't do anything about it because you're now an employee. You're not an owner anymore. You're not and that has been to a large degree how they maneuvered themselves into this catbird seat, where now it's a kind of tax slavery system. And every day that the average American goes to work in January, February, March, April, May, and June, they don't see a nickel of it. The government is nice enough to spread out the payments over the entire year, but the average person, when you include the overt taxes of the 1040 and the income tax, the covert taxes of every time you get a gallon of gasoline or buy a beer or smoke a cigar or pay your cable bill or pay your cell phone bill or get an airline ticket, or all the other ways that they're taxing you on the sly, and inflation. So the value that they're stealing out of your dollars through this corrupt monetary system, that's over for 50% of the average person's income, and that's tax slavery. And that's you working for the government, which is not really for the government. It's really for the people that are using government to rob and control the population. So you're working for this system. Half of the year, you don't see a nickel of it. But they are, like I said, nice enough to spread the payments out over the full year.
So, and everything operates with the threat of force or even violence, which I think is the classic definition of criminality. You brought up the Constitution. That could be a vast topic as well, but maybe we'll just touch on it if you don't mind. The Constitution, most people think it gives us rights. It doesn't give us any rights. There is some brilliance in there that delineates what the government is supposed to do and not do. They've circumvented that. But the Constitution originally was an abrogation of debt. Abrogation meaning, of course, that it's a transfer of debt from one party to another. So after the Revolutionary War, where we borrowed money to fight the Brits, who have never left, by the way, we were on the hook for that, and the colonists said, stick it, when the folks said, hey, will you be sureties for the debt? So they created the Constitution in order to shift that debt to a private corporation. It was incorporated in Delaware. People know that it's been reincorporated many times, the Civil War era and everything. but basically it's their debt, and the Constitution created an international business which has become this monster that we're talking about. And God gives us rights. We are born with them. And it has nothing to do with the Constitution. And I kind of go a little bit nuts every time I hear people talk about their constitutional rights. So, what could you add to that?
Well, a lot of people don't realize the word right. Everybody uses the word right. I've got a right to this. I have a right to own a gun. And the word right comes from the natural law tradition. And in the natural law tradition, which is essentially the basics of the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, which is in every civilization, essentially is codified into almost every civilization out there has some version of the golden rule. And in natural law, there are five, depending on who you ask, there's 5 to 7 things that are wrongs. Stealing is obviously wrong. Rape is wrong. Murder is wrong. Theft is wrong. And all of these are, by the way, are theft. So murder is the theft of life. Rape is the theft of sexual choice. Theft is theft. Trespass is theft of safety in your lair. And so these things are obviously wrong because there's a victim. And so the other side of that coin is anything that is not a wrong is your right. And so if you're not hurting somebody else in the world, you have the right to do whatever you want to do as long as you're not hurting anybody else. Now, the government, the Constitution was supposed to codify those rights and just make sure that the government wasn't going to trample on the rights that everybody understood that they had, not from the government, but from being a free, independent human being on this planet. And so they kind of tricked the population into saying, okay, well, we'll codify these rights if you go along with us having a government in Washington, D.C. But as I've kind of broken down, on previous episodes, it's impossible to have a legitimate moral government. You can't. So at the time the Constitution was passed, there's probably 3 million people living on the continent. And so the idea that, 4 to 5 dozen slave owners, politicians, and attorneys could go into a room on a continent of 3 million people, okay, and write down on a fancy piece of paper that they alone get to make up rules for everybody and steal the wealth of others, and then proclaim that it's valid. That was the really big scam. Is that you can't do it today. If there's 10 people on an island, there's no way you can't write down something that forces 4 people to work for the other 6 and it to be legitimate, moral, and desirable and logical. And so government really has been the biggest scam in all of history. Now there's a lot of patriot mythology around the idea that, well, we have the best constitution in the world and we have the best government in the world, and there's a gazillion books that the government has written itself explaining how we have the best government in the world. But it's all poppycock, because even if you believe in the myth of the Constitution, that it's there, that government is created by ourselves to protect our own rights, even if you believe that, it didn't work. It didn't protect those rights. The government routinely violates every single one of the Bill of Rights, except for the quartering of soldiers. I don't think they've quartered soldiers for a while. But whether it's your right to not to be searched and seized, try and exercise that when you get pulled over by the police or at an airport. Whether it's freedom of speech, they'll put you into a free speech zone and won't let you have anything. We have freedom of speech without reach. If you're in the alternative media like you and I are, as you know, you will be demonetized, deplatformed, de-indexed, shadow banned. And so even if people subscribe and want to hear what you have to say, they may not actually see it in their feed, even if they've subscribed to you. Your emails are going to go into spam. I could tell you censorship stories forever. And so, and the government was supposed to limit, the Constitution was supposed to limit the government, and we have the largest government that the world has ever seen. And so the government, so the Constitution didn't work as advertised, even if you believe in the the official story of the quote unquote official story of the Constitution, that it was all done to protect your life, liberty, and property. The case I make in government, the biggest scam in history, is that it's best thought of as a technique for robbing and controlling populations, and that they get away with it because they have co-opted the monopoly media and monopoly academia, the mandatory government school, where the mandatory government school and the media, every single channel, government is legitimate, government is legitimate, government is legitimate, until as an adult you can step back, and you may never encounter that idea because it's the biggest secret that the government wants to keep from you, and the bankers want to keep from you, and the system wants to keep from you, is the idea that it is legitimate, it is illegitimate on its face, that it is impossible to have a moral, logical, legitimate government. There's no way to do it with a constitution. There's no way to do it with a coronation. There's no way to do it with a ceremony. There's no way to do it with an election. There's no way to have a moral, legitimate government. That's the thing they don't want you to know, but you really have to be able to step back from what you were indoctrinated as a kid with what this, and we'll talk about, and not just indoctrinated as a kid, but they've been in as I break down in the new book, To See the Cages, to Leave It. It's the media coming in on every single channel, and not just it's the government is legitimate, the government is legitimate, the government is legitimate, but they're actually running tricks with the media to give you a warm and fuzzy about the government by doing things like product placing the American flag at moments of high positive emotion, always making the government the hero. The government's always saving the day. The CIA is, thank God for the CIA. Otherwise, there would be nuclear bombs going off in every city on the planet on a pretty regular basis if it wasn't for the CIA.
And
The
all
FBI
our
is saving the day. The TSA. There's a movie last Christmas season about a TSA guy that saves a city from a nerve gas attack. It's ridiculous. The government is making itself the hero, controlling the information the population receives. And here's the big reveal. I'll just give it away to the audience. They're presenting government as a religion where the state is the god, and they're not calling it a religion, but they're using all the tricks and the techniques of an unethically manipulative religion to get people to go along with government, including, like I said, these unethically manipulative techniques where they're having Hollywood weave the government's legitimacy, desirability, and necessity into both movies, television shows, popular culture. They're putting it into your social media feeds. They're putting things like, Lee Greenwood singing "Thank God I'm an American, at least I know I'm free" into your social media feeds. They're suggesting government-sponsored books for you. They're in every place you look around, and you probably have never noticed it. But the magic of the book, To See the Cages, to Leave It, is it's very picture-oriented. And once you see it, and once you recognize, oh man, I've just never noticed. Like, one of the things the book does is you can't even just flip through it without going, I've never noticed that pattern. I've never
yeah.
noticed
Well,
that
that
that's
was
what's going on.
uh,
Is that
uh,
what you found? I mean,
yeah.
like,
So that was the brilliance of your first book, Government: The Biggest Scam. I had that on my coffee table. It's they're wonderful coffee table books, and I had people come over, a couple in-laws I'm thinking of in particular, that are pretty brainwashed, and they could listen to me, and they just write me off as a whack job when I just try to present some possibilities that they might think about. But then you start thumbing through this book, and it's very picture oriented, and it really caught the attention of a lot of people that would come through my house. Now, in similar fashion, I was holding this up before. Your latest book is wonderful in the same way. So maybe would you like to go through the 25 techniques? I know it would take a long time to go through all of them, and you've already hit on a good number of them. But let's open up the book. And for instance, you were talking about how they debauch the currency, and everything that you were talking about, is here with nice imagery and very easy to understand. That for people that don't want to read Federal Reserve publications that actually tell you what they're actually doing to rob us, and because they know nobody's going to read that stuff. So here it is, right here. Just I'm going to the page where the 25 techniques. So should we go through those? You can take them in any order and maybe highlight and talk about them.
Sure. Well, absolutely. So technique number one is the mandatory government school, if I remember, correctly. But the mandatory government school, we're going to take kids when they're young, before they're old enough to really understand what's being done with them, and we're going to run a variety. We're going to put them into a mandatory government school where the teacher, the priest. So you can think of the government school as the church. You can think of the public school teacher as the priest, where she's going to teach the children about the holy documents of the Constitution, where she is going to have them pledge their allegiance to a kind of common prayer to the flag. There's going to be a social it's going to be like all the other kids are doing it, so surely you want to do it too. It's hard. There's a social pressure to participate. They're going to sing the hymns of the national anthem and the Star Spangled Banner. When they're in middle school, they will be taken to Washington, D.C., Mecca, the holy city, and they will be taken to the Capitol, which is a carbon copy of the Vatican for a reason. So it is a cathedral towards government, to the God of government. And government is presented not as a tool to take care of, to protect life, liberty, and property. Government is presented as something that you would pray to by voting. So voting is kind of like the equivalent of prayer, to make the world the way that you want it to be, to protect you from the potential of not having money in your old age, or not having money as a single mom, or whatever it is. There, like, government is the supernatural entity that is going to protect you against all of the harms of the world that might befall you. And all you have to do is be willing to participate and promote this system, which is going to rob and extort money from your friends, your neighbors, and your relatives, and it will give you that money and it will transfer it to you. And as a middle schooler, it blows your mind. I still remember going to these school trips to the capitals and to the and you're away from your parents for the first time, and it's like great fun. And they're going to take you into the temples, the monuments, and they're going to show you the deities of Lincoln and Jefferson, and it's going to be very hushed, and it's going to be very reverent, and you're going to be kind of subsumed into this system.
You could think of it almost as a form of idolatry, can't you?
Well, it is idolatry, because government is presented as the God that if you worship it, if you pray to it, that it will give you what you want. Whether it's going to provide for you in your old age, it's going to provide for you in your time of need, it's going to take care of you when you're sick. I jokingly have there's a meme in there. I forgot the quote I was going to bring, but
No, that's okay. You have a lot of wonderful quotes.
Yeah, it is 100% idolatry, and I've got a link. Both of the books are supported by a credit card sized flash drive that we call the Liberator. and this is what it looks like. And so on this book, we actually have a book put out by the Libertarian Christian Institute called The Idolatry of Statism, where they actually break down, chapter and verse.
I have
Yeah,
mine right here.
there you go. Oh, you have a 32. We're up to 64 gigs.
Oh, I'm behind. Okay.
I
So,
will get you one. It will go out
thanks.
after. I'll get you one out. One of the new ones
Awesome.
out. But we're up to
But these are
64 gigs of
brilliant. These are
evidence.
amazing.
And we've got in addition to the books like The Idolatry of Statism, we've got documentaries and we've got truth music from the Liberty Movement's hottest artists, and we've got memes and we've got short videos, and it's chock full of everything that is being censored off the internet, and it's a way of making sure that some of this evidence of government illegitimacy and evidence of government criminality doesn't go anywhere. And then once you have a Liberator, you are authorized and encouraged to make copies, free copies for your friends. And so a lot of people, I run into a lot of people that come up to me at conferences or events, and they're like, hey, I discovered your work because we were at a Liberty meetup, and somebody came in and they threw down 30 flash drives, and everybody got one, and that's how I discovered your work. And so there's no way to stop. Like the good news, I guess the good news part of my message is there's no way to stop the signal in the information age. There's
Yeah.
no way to, they can try and they can deplatform you, they can demonetize you, they can de-index you, but we're figuring out ways of getting around that censorship, even if it's sneaker netting,
Yeah.
flash
It's a
drives
brilliant
around
system. It
and
really
physical
is.
books. But that is that is the core of it. The number one technique is the government school system, and that's really a whole bunch of other techniques. So there's a whole bunch of techniques assumed under that, because when you're in the government school system, they're going to run techniques on your kids like collective punishment, public shaming. They're going to use the red, yellow, green troublemaker board to where if you talk out of turn, they're going to move your child's name from the green part of the board to the yellow part of the board. And if he talks again, he goes to the red part of the board, and they'll put him at the quiet table, which is really the public shaming table in the center of the cafeteria during lunch, where he's there by himself and is kind of in the middle. And it's like the
Boy,
equivalent of the
talk
town stocks.
talk about abuse. I grew up in the old school system where the nun just broke a ruler over the back of your knuckles, but it's evolved quite a bit since then, it seems like.
I had a football coach that would paddle us with a paddle that had air holes in it, and you would get pops. So we had I grew up in Texas, and we had corporal punishment. That's another you're going to do what the government employee tells you, and if you don't do what the government employee tells you, then they will hit you with a paddle that has air holes in it, wielded by the football coach.
And
And so
talk about football as being one of their theatrics that get us into the whole militaristic mindset. I played college, and one of the teams we played in the season was University of Texas. We'd go to Austin Stadium, and boy, you go and there's 110,000 people, and they're rolling out the American flags, and jets are flying overhead, and it's quite a show. And then, of course, the football camp is run just like a military basic training sort of thing, and yes sir, no sir, and yeah, it's pretty incredible, and we love to
so
go see the gladiators.
Bear, I played football too. I didn't play in college, but I played in high school,
Hmm.
and so I'm a fan of football. I love the game, but I just want but I'm also I realize now kind of like what was going on, and we're going to get the best and the brightest, and we're going to crash them together in a way
Right.
almost designed to produce brain damage. And what's being done today, especially at the NFL level,
Hmm.
is the football team becomes the artificial tribe, and so human beings are very very tribal, and so your real tribe is your family, and your neighbors, and your church, and your people that you work with. That's your real tribe. And so they don't want you spending time and focused on your real tribe and how y'all can all grow together and how y'all can all support each other and how you can all, help each other, whether it's co-garden or whether it's, help somebody start a business, or whether it's, takes care of somebody that maybe needs their house repaired in the community. They don't want you focused on that, because that's the things that bring people together and strengthen the community and strengthen the tribe and strengthen everything. They would much rather have you focused on this artificial tribe where you're taking, a solid part of your weekend and you're wasting it, watching, frankly, adults play children's games. And so
Exactly.
like that has been, and then, but this monopoly system is going to go ahead and make that seem like that's masculine, and that's what you're supposed to do if you're a man, and that's how you spend Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and that you don't talk about politics and religion during Thanksgiving. Everybody just watches a piece of furniture. And so like that is part of the way that it's been indoctrinated into the system. I still love to play the game. I like to watch a game as much as anybody else, but I try and keep that piece of the pie, that entertainment piece of the pie, at the kind of right proportion that it should be in. It doesn't, that piece of the pie doesn't take up the entire plate. It's just a little sliver, and I get a little bit of it, like you would have candy. And that's if everybody did that, we'd be a lot better off as a
Yeah,
civilization.
and we could enjoy ourselves in the game, and there's no harm in that. So you have 25 of these, and it'd take a long time to go through all of them, but we have number two, government affiliated scouting programs, three, junior reserve officer, four, police training, five, military basic training. Any of those that you'd like to highlight, and then we can go through a few more after that, or
Sure.
or
So
anything
the
after that?
if you take a look at the government's mandatory school system is going to produce a taxpayer that is going to tithe and is going to semi-voluntarily hand over 50% of their income to the cult leadership, and they're going to gather around the pope of the religion, the president, and a lot of people are going to invest part of their identity in the leader. And so one of the things I break down further in the book is that, that human beings are biologically predisposed to have a strong leader. And so because we were just talking about the tribal nature of human beings and the artificial tribe, it has been it's been an advantage to have a strong leader. And so what the system will do is present you a blue leader or a red leader. The red leader is designed to appeal to kind of rural conservatives. The blue leader is designed to appeal to kind of urban liberals. Okay, and they're going to give you what's known as a Hobson's choice. And a Hobson's choice is a fake choice. Old man Hobson ran a livery stable, and you could rent any horse you wanted as long as it was the one closest to the door. And so the term Hobson's choice means no choice at all. And so you can either have blue government leader, or you can have red government leader, and then that's going to be the pope of the artificially indoctrinated religion. And then a lot of people, because there is a biological desire to have a leader, they get themselves invested, and you can see it. It's a cult-like, it's the leader of the cult. It's you can see people in the MAGA movement. You can see them exhibiting the classic textbook examples of cult followers doing cult things, whether it's wearing the red MAGA hat, whether it's putting the bandage over the ear after his fake assassination attempt, whatever it is, it's wearing the flag, wearing symbolically the flag of the system that is, enslaving and controlling you, somewhat humorously in many occasions, as you can see in the book, of people literally dressing themselves in the American flag. And so once you see it, that's really what the book is designed to do, is you cannot flip through the book and not realize what's going on. And then once you see it, you can never ever unsee it. And you recognize, most people not everybody. Like it really, like if you're getting your paycheck from the government, if you've been through Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, junior, explorers, junior ROTC, military training, and then in some cases police training after that, there's you can't you can't really be, you're not
Yeah.
going to,
You know,
they've
and
run.
in my demographic, I hear the excuse a lot, because everybody's on Social Security or some kind of retirement and they can't buck the system because they're dependent on it. So, but, as things get exposed and some people are actually, willing to look at information, it does breed a bit of ambivalence in people. But then what I hear from my peers is that, well, I'm too old to do anything about it. And you know, can't change at this point, so they count on everybody going along, even when they know that it's a big scam. But I think the younger generation coming up, whatever they call them, X, Z, whatever, they're there's the folks that unfortunately get in the college system. They might be gone forever, but there's a lot of youngsters that are really questioning things now, and it gives me hope. And also, I look at my own kids. We brought them up at home, birthed them at home, homeschooled them. Now they have kids. They've done the same exact thing. And so there is, a number of kids coming up that, really give us promise if if the present government doesn't do something to succeed in trying to kill everybody, which is exactly what they're trying to do right now. So we've got information by the military, number six, intelligence. You got into CIA a
Well,
little bit.
let's get
Oh,
back
go
to the
ahead.
military. Yeah, I want to just because I like it's a really, the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts and the
Uh-huh.
Explorers and the JROTCs are a really core piece of it that most people never give a second thought to. And I was a Cub Scout, I was a Boy Scout, and so I like to say that scouting, like rat poison, rat poison is 99% delicious food. Otherwise, the rats wouldn't eat it. But at the core of scouting is a hidden curriculum of the flag worship, of the pre-militarization, of getting you into the uniform. And so it's a government sponsored, affiliated youth program where the kids are going to receive awards, either Cub Scout Adventure Loops or Boy Scout merit badges, for regurgitating the doctrine of the religion. And then again, there's going to be social pressure, placed on them to participate. Everyone is constantly, doing flag ceremonies and pledging allegiance to the flag, and they're learning how to, you can't throw the flag away when it's done. You've got to bury the flag. You've got to burn the flag in a ceremony, and then a lot of times the ashes are then ceremonially buried. And so they're going to create this reverence for the government, and they're going to give kids awards for regurgitating the doctrine of the religion, and they're going to run these unethically manipulative techniques on the kids while they're in there, like the uniform. And so uniform means single form, and what it is it's replacing an individual identity with a group identity. So now the kids are part of the group, and this is what the group does. And then they pile on, they create a kind of an artificial group pressure for everybody to go along within the group. And then a lot of people don't realize, but especially, now in the modern age, a lot of these kids, it's scouting has become a parking lot for autistic kids. And so the brain damage of the mercury and aluminum, laced vaccines has produced all of these kids that don't socialize well with other kids. And so a lot of the kids that are in scouting today, they've been put there because that's the way that their parent, the single mom, can get their kid to play with other kids and be assured that the kid is going to get some time with other kids and get to get friends with other kids. And so
Interesting. Yeah, I hadn't
yeah, so
considered that.
you've got brain damaged kids that are being put through these techniques, and then they come out and they go into the military where they have that same So they've been indoctrinated into the love of the uniform. They've been, conditioned into hierarchical command and control from kind of like a young age. They're participating in all of the flag worship, and they're being, forced to learn with like a cookie at the end the citizenship in the world, citizenship in the nation are two of the merit badges that you have to get. It's not even They're not even the mandatory one. It's not even the optional ones. It's the mandatory ones that you have to get. And then once you regurgitate that, they give you the cookie of the Cub Scout Adventure Loop or the merit badge. But that system is ultimately going to produce what is known as an order follower. And so the government school produces the taxpayer that's willing to semi-voluntarily tithe and believes in the idea of the state and the government and everything like that. The Cub Scouts, Boy Scouts, Explorers, JROTC, ROTC, that's going to produce an order follower that's willing to set their morality aside and use violence for the government on peaceful people. In the military, it's we're going to go abroad and kill whoever we're told. And in the police force, we're going to use violence on peaceful people, either to enforce the morality of the religion. We're going to, arrest people for things that aren't really crimes, victimless crimes like smoking a plant or gambling or whatever, like things that we're going to use violence on people to arrest them for things that aren't really crimes, which then compacts the police into an unhealthy dynamic because they're really the criminals, because they're violating natural law. They're creating harm in society. They're doing wrongs, okay? And so that compacts them into an unhealthy group dynamic, or they're going to raise revenue for the government and the police force by doing road piracy and pulling people over for, victimless crimes, trying to search their car, trying to find the end of a joint so that they can confiscate the vehicle or fine you thousands of dollars or whatever it is. So they're going to rob their neighbors for the government, and the system that produces that is the Cub Scouts, Weeblos, Boy Scouts, Explorers, JROTC, ROTC, and then police and military training. If your final thing on that is, if you're not, a lot of people don't even realize this, but after Boy Scouts, there's a program called the Explorers, and there's police explorers, there's Secret Service explorers, there's military explorers, and so now the kids are going to be segmented off away from the rest of society. They're going to go in the summertime. They're going to go to military bases where they're going to be put into the uniform. They're going to have their head shaved. They're going to be compacted into this. There's other unethically manipulative techniques that the military will run. Once you get into the military, but they start it on the explorers. On the police side, they'll be given uniforms, like little mini police uniforms. They'll begin doing ride-alongs with the police officers. And so, a lot of people don't realize that this is going on. A lot of people don't realize that the government's running high schools where the entire curriculum is the government or the Marine Corps or the military. And so these kids are coming up in and they're being subjected to these unethically manipulative techniques that's all woven around allegiance to government and being willing to kill for government and being willing to use violence on their friends and family and neighbors for the government. And people don't think about it, and about what's really going on. I break it all down in the book. I could have I use police military training as one technique. But actually, there's in that one article on the techniques that the military is using, there's probably a dozen. I probably listed over a dozen little sub techniques in addition to the uniform and the shaving of the head and it's sleep deprivation, it's collective punishment, it's if you've seen Full Metal Jacket. You've seen the blanket party. A blanket party is where they take the non-conforming and they'll hold them down on on their bunk, and and everybody else in the platoon or the training regiment or whatever it is will come, and they'll either wrap a towel, a soap bar, and a towel to make a flail. A flail is something that you swing and it and it hits you. If they
We
really
used to
don't
call it a
like you,
blanket party.
it's called a blanket party, and if they really don't like you, it'll be a lock in a sock. And so the soap bar and the towel hurts like hell, but the lock in the sock is the one that if they really don't like you, you're being beaten with a padlock in a sock as a flail. And it still goes on today. I have a friend of mine's son. They did it to his son. And so I know for a fact it still goes on today. It's not just something in the movies. And so these are just a few, just a small handful of the unethically manipulative techniques that they're using on the police and the military to get them to use violence for the government, either to raise revenue or to go abroad and murder people, in these wars that are, for resources and stealing oil and whatever is the lie of the day of why we're going to war.
Yeah, and World War II was really the genesis of all this, where, my dad came back from World War II. He was Air Force, and they were really believing that they fought a just war and did good things. Now in hindsight, we realize it goes a little deeper than that.
Yeah.
But, I grew up hearing about, well, to be a man, you should go to the military and, become disciplined and that's the way you do it. So it continues all the way into the extremes that you're speaking on as far as what it's evolved to. So it's really, I think we're right there where we look at other countries, like overt communist countries, and it's still couched in the Constitution and freedom, but what's the difference between ourselves and a communist state?
Well, that's a fascinating point that you just brought up, because one of the things I broke down in Government: The Biggest Scam in History, as you know, is that there is a playbook of techniques. The new book focuses on the religious aspect of it,
Hmm.
but all of these techniques are being used by the so-called bad countries as well. And so in Government: The Biggest Scam in History, I compared I looked at 20 techniques, and then I looked at it at what it was in Nazi Germany, what it looked like in East Germany, what it looked like in the Soviet Union, and what it looked like in the United States. And so on each page, you can see the technique, and then you're left scratching your head because, well, wait a minute, we're the good guys. Why are we using the same techniques as the Nazis, the Soviets, or the East Germans? And you realize, hey, wait, it's a playbook. Like, you can't, flip through the book and not understand that this is a playbook. Most people are visual learners. They come to insight, very, very quickly. And so once you see it, you can't unsee it. And whether, like, let's let the boogeyman of today, Iran and North Korea and Russia, what techniques are they running on their own tax slaves and on their own populations? They're running mandatory government schools. They're running government affiliated youth programs. They're running, they've got their equivalent of the Boy Scouts and the Explorer program. They've got their equivalent of the JROTC and the ROTC. They've got their own, like, it's the exact same program even in the bad countries. And once somebody goes through the program, then you've got somebody that's willing to goose step. You've got somebody that's willing to use violence on their neighbors. You've got somebody that's not, able to really think because they've been controlling the information that they receive. They've, moved them off to a military base. They've controlled the information to them. They've run all these unethically manipulative techniques on them. They've shot them full of vaccines. They can't think straight. Now you've got a force that is willing to, in the case of like what ICE is doing right now, is willing to go and scoop up people in the middle of the night and and black bag them into vehicles, and I think they're just getting the population used to having goons on the street that will scoop up people.
No, no doubt about it. No doubt about
Yeah.
it. And one of the main planks of communism is, primary is the abolition of private property, which has been achieved in our country by attaching a warranty deed to our homes, which means we don't own it anymore. So I would challenge anybody to read the 10 planks of communism and find one deviation from how we do things in America.
And to to that point as well. So the banks trick people into these mortgages. They create the mortgage, create the money out of thin air, and then when you can't pay, even if you've paid 29 years on your 30-year mortgage, or I guess 49 years on your 50-year mortgage, and you've already paid 2 to 3 times the amount that you borrowed in interest, and you can't make those final payments, who's going to come and take that house? It's going to be the people that they've run through these unethically manipulative, programs. They will come and they will take your house because they're order followers, and they're going to set their morality aside, and all they can do is follow orders. And this is how they've set the system up, and this is how they do it. And so now you've paid 29 years or 49 years on your mortgage. You more than paid for the house on a loan that they created out of thin air, that they made up out of whole cloth and whatever, and they'll take your house. And now they have real wealth, and you're now homeless. And the guy that did that for them is this guy that went through the Cub Scouts, the Webelos, the Boy Scouts, the Explorers, the JROTC, the ROTC, and had all of these dozens and dozens and dozens of manipulative techniques, unethically manipulative techniques, run on them to produce someone that would do that deed for them, and steal your house.
So we've run through a good number of the overt methods that are utilized. Number 10 could start off, we're kind of implying this all along, but number 10 is subliminal programming. Would you like to comment on that at all?
There's a lot of the things that come out of Hollywood. There's a lot of subliminals in them without you knowing. And so I think the one that you're talking about is subliminal text, and there's a sign-off message from the 1960s. And for the younger members of your audience, I got to explain what a sign-off message was. But in the old days of television wasn't 24/7, 365. And at the end of the broadcast day, around 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, there would be the sign-off message. And the sign-off message was always government propaganda. It was always, generally, it was the flag flying, and it would
Right.
be, heroic, landscapes and Indians, and, and American iconography and everything. And so this particular one from the 1960s has the text of the Star Spangled Banner is being, scrolling across the bottom of the screen as somebody's singing the Star Spangled Banner. And you got to understand, at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, most people are in kind of an alpha state. And that's a brainwave state where information flows into the brain uncritically. It's just accepted by the brain. There's no cognitive processing to it. And so as these messages are scrolling, as the words of the Star Spangled Banner are scrolling off the screen, other words are flashed on the screen as it scrolls off. And the messages that are being flashed on the screen is, government is God, obey God government, rebellion won't be tolerated, and other messages like government is God. And so it's the the subtitle of Government, the Biggest Scam in History is how intergenerational organized crime runs the government, media, and academia. So they're controlling the information that comes to you, including putting subliminal text into your feed, okay, when you're in an alpha state and when information is flowing in uncritically. And so they're telling you that government is God and that rebellion won't be tolerated, and obey the government. And they're doing it in an unethically manipulative trick. So they're running a trick on you. And then some of the other kind of, I guess some of the modern equivalents is the product placement of the flag. And so some of the other techniques that I cover in the book are there's a documentary that breaks down a lot of academic scholarship around the fact that that the government is paying Hollywood to weave pro-government messages into movies and television shows. Sometimes this is done by, providing them with, millions and millions or tens of millions of dollars worth of military equipment, the F-18s for Top Gun Maverick, the carriers, the military bases to shoot on. And in exchange, the directors are weaving the American flag, product placing it in moments of high positive emotion, and they're changing their scripts. The other thing that the documentary is called Theaters of War. And you can actually, in the book, there's a number of different like short videos, and you can just, QR code scan with your phone, a page from the book, or if you're in the EPUB version of the book, you can, click on that video, and it will actually play, kind of the trailer for this documentary, Theaters of War. But Theaters of War breaks down, over 1,000 movies and over 1,000 television shows where the government has had some kind of input into the creative process, where they frequently have script control, where they've actually changed history in many cases. So when you see war, portrayed on the screen, you're seeing a sanitized, you're not going to see the My Lai massacre. You're not going to see the Phoenix program in Vietnam where CIA hit teams went and scooped up, tens of thousands of people and murdered them without a trial. You're not going to see any of that. You're only going to see kind of sanitized, cartoonish version of what the Vietnam War, or there's a couple of examples that go against it. One of which we talked about in it had the blanket party. I'm drawing there's a couple of
Few Good Men.
No, it wasn't A Few Good Men. It was Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, okay.
So there's a couple of outliers, but for the most part, the government is going to be the hero, the American military is the hero, and through this process where they have script control, at the, before the movie's ever shot, they're changing history by excising out important things that make the government look bad. And they've got to deal with all of the directors and the producers in Hollywood that if they don't make the government look good, if the end product doesn't make the government look good, they're not going to get, $50 million worth of F-18s for Top Gun Maverick 3 unless the movie comes out to be, a recruiting commercial for the military. And so that's a lot of the people are being raised on this content and raised on this worldview. And if every single channel that you see, the government is the hero, the government's saving the day, the CIA is saving the day, the FBI is saving the day, the TSA is saving the day, the Fish and Wildlife Service is saving the day, and it's funny how many different government agencies are made the hero in some of these movies.
Oh, yeah.
You're going to grow up with an entirely different outlook on what the government is unless you know that they're doing it to you. And once you know that they're doing it to you, then you see it everywhere. Then all of a sudden, you can't, like I said, once you realize that it's going on, then you see it everywhere. You like we'll sit there and I'll watch a movie with my fiance, and every time we see American flag, I'll go bing, 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 bing. It drives her crazy,
It
but like
really,
the
for us, it's really narrowed our choices of what we're able to watch when we're going through Amazon Prime or something, because it's all that kind of garbage. We've got religious iconograph.
iconography.
Sorry, I couldn't get that word out. Where it's great in your book. You have all the pictures of the politicians with the emblem of the United States superimposed behind their head, so it looks like a halo. I mean, it's just so in your face. It's ridiculous.
So
And
one of
go
the
ahead.
what I'm doing with the books is I understand the way that people learn. Most people are visual learners, and so I know a lot of your audience already knows this. And I didn't
Uh-huh.
make the book for you. What I did is I made the book for your friends, your family, and your relatives who might not understand that this is going on. And one of the things about the human brain, human beings, is they're really, really good pattern recognition machines. And so once the technique that Bear was talking about was that they're using religious iconography to make the presidents and the politicians seem holy. And so they're giving the presidents penumbras and halos, and they're photographing the presidents in front of religious iconography and in front of Jesus and in poses like Jesus and things of that nature. And most people never realize that this is going on because these images come by one at a time. And if you only see one every month or so, you might not understand that it's going on. But if you're flipping through this book and you come up to 3 dozen examples over 2 different pages, okay, I think there's somewhere close to 3 dozen examples, and you look at it and your brain goes, clicks, and you're like, that's a pattern, that's artificial, they're doing that on purpose, they're trying to trick me. And then once you get that they're trying to trick you, most people are out. Like nobody likes to be made a fool of. Nobody likes to be chumped and tricked and suckered. And so once you realize that they're doing things to trick you, most people are out. So if you've ever wanted to wake up your friends, your family, or your colleagues to what's really going on in the world, this is a very, very powerful tool to do it, because the magician only can get away with the trick until the population understands how the magician does the trick, and then the trick doesn't fool anybody. And so what I'm doing with the books is I'm showing everybody how the magician does the tricks.
Yeah, and it's brilliant. And there's so much we could go over here. We're going to be coming up on time pretty soon, but I just want to go through one more. Everything that we've been talking about is been so effective up until now, but I think they are starting to lose their grip a bit. So that might leave us to number 17, which is just frank poisoning, biological warfare. And it begins with adulterating foods that we give to our kids and adults, of course. And then that leads us, into pharmaceuticals. And it also leads us into what's being aerosoled over our heads. A lot of people now are saying, well, these plastics are getting in our bodies. It's because we have, all these plastic bottles and everything that we use. Well, actually, no, that's not the main source of contamination. We can now prove that they're actually making plastic polymers and nanoparticles and spraying them in the air. And that's what's getting in our blood and creating all sorts of things. This is kind of my wheelhouse because a lot of people come to me, with problems. And for many years, when they started getting adulterated with heavy metals and having epidemic proportions of Alzheimer's and MS and so forth, and we were able to connect dots and also understand how to help people recover their health. So number 17, we start with the kids, of course. You always have to start with the kids, and that includes vaxes. Would you like to maybe finalize with some comments on that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're trying to control the population, you want to keep them dumb, you want to keep them brain damaged, you want to keep them, it goes back to, I don't know if you're familiar with the term the little people,
Hmm.
but the term the little people actually came from kind of feudal Europe, where the aristocracy was physically bigger than the serfs because they were keeping the population half starved to where they were actually physically smaller. And so when you hear the term the little people, that they were actually the serfs were actually physically smaller than the aristocracy because the aristocracy was waging this kind of biological warfare against them by keeping them malnourished and keeping them on certain kinds of food. And then I think that developed. I think like a lot of people don't realize this, but like black tea concentrates fluoride, and so like I think the British made a cultural touchstone of everybody having their black tea at the exact same time every day, and dosing the
Interesting.
population with concentrated fluoride. And so this is the way this the people that are in power because they're willing to do things that other people are not willing to do. It's hardcore. And so whether it's putting aluminum and mercury in vaccines, polysorbate 80 in vaccines, formaldehyde in vaccines, whether it's putting BPA and BPS in can linings and register receipts, whether it's putting recombinant bovine growth hormone in dairy, whether it's spraying glyphosate on the wheat and then double dosing it on the wheat right before harvest to quote unquote as a desiccant to dry it out. Whether it's using aspartame and every single gum that you can get at a Walmart or a Target, or a gas station, whether it's stevia in Zevia, whether it's I can go on, but like we're
Or
atrazine.
your local health food store is mandated to store their organic fruits and vegetables in the back room and treated with the peas. So it doesn't matter where you shop.
So all of these things, atrazine is another, a gender bender herbicide that is being used. I think it's the number three herbicide in the country, and that's the one that makes the frogs gay. And so, like we're having the this system is has bought up and so it's the banks at the top. They're creating money out of thin air. They're providing certain companies with unlimited funds to buy up and consolidate their own industries. And these are the dozen or so, consumer product and food companies. This is the PepsiCos. This is the Unilevers. This is the Colgate Palmolives. This is the Coca-Cola Company. This is Yum Brands. I forget who owns Yum Brands. That owns Taco Bell and others. And so we're going to have these companies put harmful ingredients. We're going to have them put addictive ingredients like glutamates into the food to make the food physically and psychologically addictive to the people that eat it. And so we're going to poison the population. We're going to keep them dumbed down. They're not going to understand how they're being robbed. They're not going to care. They're not going to take any action. They're not going to do anything. And so again, you can only keep somebody in that state until they understand that that's going out. And then many people, not everyone unfortunately, will extricate themselves. But like part of it is we're going to dumb down the population. I call it the fluoridated, vaccinated, government schooled, corporate food eating, dumbed down public. But a lot of people, they can't even, it's not even going to register what we're saying to them because they're so out of it because they've fallen victim to this chemical biological warfare program being waged against them by the people that are tax farming them for over half their income in overt taxes, covert taxes, and inflation.
And the very fact that they're engaged in obvious population control testifies to their fear of us, and that day when enough of us, those who will remain, is what we say in our world, reclaim their spirit and rise up, because at that moment they're done for. So we're ahead. I think we have some bumpy times ahead. There's no way, mathematically that we can avoid it, but there are enough people waking up, and your work is doing a tremendous job contributing to that wake up. So thank you for that. So I'd love to have another talk with you someday in the near future, because there's so much more we could cover, and I'm sure by then you'll even have more good things to share. So in the meantime, can you tell us where we can find all your work, and where people can buy your books and get your little credit card there?
So my organization is the Art of Liberty Foundation. We're a startup, voluntarist, public policy organization or think tank, and the goal is to have an organization that is kind of like a Heritage or a Cato or a Brookings, but from a principled voluntarist standpoint of the government is illegitimate on its face. And then some of the work that we're doing is we're really tracking government as that the government in Washington, whether you believe in having a government or not having a government, that the government in Washington, D.C. is being run as a criminal organization and as a criminal enterprise. And we can track, billions and billions and billions of dollars going out the back door to identifiable groups, and everything from quote unquote bailouts for the banks to stimulus to vaccines that we don't need being mandated on our children to ethanol subsidies, you name it. And so that's artofliberty.org. Most of my writing is available for free at artofliberty.substack.com. My book, Government, the Biggest Scam in History, Exposed, How Intergenerational Organized Crime Runs the Government, the Media, and Academia, is at government-scam.com. And my new book, To See the Cage is to Leave It, 25 Techniques the Few Use to Control the Many, is at seethecage.com.
Thank you so much for being with us, and I look forward to talking to you again. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. And I would encourage everybody out there to take this information and ground it in somehow with some sort of action, even if it's just sharing it with your friends and family. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you very soon.